The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Nebraska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I am very pleased to come before this House today to express support for a resolution I recently introduced to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. In a world where force and hatred often overcome understanding and reconciliation, where individuals can too easily allow conflict and strife to mute the call of conscience to peace and concord, this treaty stands as an enduring reminder that no conflict can be pervasive enough, no animosity strong enough to triumph over the will of men who turn to one another in a gesture of goodwill and humility to make a decision for peace. For peace is a choice, sometimes hard, sometimes costly. And when we look at the recent history of the Middle East, we see layer upon layer of suffering and grievance, innocent lives needlessly destroyed through relentless and unforgiving cycles of seemingly uncontrollable anger and retribution. We can choose to believe that these forces are so powerful that no political solution can be brought to bear. Perhaps that is right. Perhaps there is no political solution. Perhaps we are seeking a political solution when only a solution of the human heart can suffice. A solution that recognizes that each person in this world longs for the same things, and that the bond of our common humanity is stronger than the hatred that seeks to divide neighbor from neighbor, Muslim from Jew, or Arab from Israeli. A solution that recognizes that peace can only be found in treating others with dignity and respect, and that regardless of the circumstances, this is always possible unless one chooses otherwise. The choice for true peace does not demand appeasement of tyranny, false sentimentality, or warmth that cannot easily be summoned. It is, at its most practical, a common-sense choice for self-preservation, and at its most noble, a choice to build up rather than to tear down, a choice by leaders to bind wounds and to heal the past. Mr. Speaker, as a young man in 1979, I entered the Sinai Peninsula across from the Suez Canal, and in the vastness of the beige sand and desert, I came upon a twisted heap of metal and concrete, a scene all too familiar now throughout the Middle East. And upon that heap of concrete were scrawled the words in both English and Arabic, "Here was the war, here is the peace." The atmosphere at that time and in that place was one of jubilation and deep abiding respect for the role that the United States played in brokering a compromise for peace. Because Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel, and Anwar Sadat, the President of Egypt, at great personal risk to each, chose peace on March 26, 1979. They opened channels of communication that endure to this day and continue to point toward hope in a war-weary region. Despite the painful legacy of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, the Suez Crisis of 1956, the Six-Day War of 1967, the War of Attrition along the Suez Canal, and the Arab-Israeli War of 1973, these leaders stood together to make peace possible. In the poignant words of Prime Minister Begin, "No more wars, no more bloodshed, peace unto you, shalom, salam, forever." The peace treaty provided for the mutual diplomatic recognition of Egypt and Israel and ended the state of war between the two nations dating back to the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Mr. Speaker, this was no easy choice. It was a costly choice. The choice these leaders took, in the words of President Sadat, to stand together with the boldness of heroes who dedicate themselves to a sublime aim, to erect a huge edifice of peace, an edifice that serves as a beacon for generations to come, led to the expulsion of Egypt from the Arab League and to the assassination of President Sadat himself. Yet to this day, the treaty beckons us to challenge presuppositions about the intransigence and inevitability of conflict in the Middle East. Perhaps the Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty of 1979 is an example that can be replicated and modeled throughout the region. Perhaps, Mr. Speaker, we will see twisted piles of rubble and concrete from more recent conflicts marked with the poignant words, "Here was the war, here is the peace." I urge my colleagues to support this resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Fortenberry, reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly.
Thank you, Mr.